A waiter said, "Ma'am, I see your glass is empty. Would you like another one?" Lady to the waitress, "Why would I want two empty glasses?" All right, you can take two deep healing breaths with me. One more. Okay. I'm going to jump right in and just say that nature has endowed humanity with mechanisms to manage stress, fears, and even severe trauma. We can survive childhood rejection by our parents, our peers, and ourselves. We could also survive adult trauma. There are two mannerisms that we inherited through evolution meant to keep us safe, but that might alter our lives negatively. The freeze fawn responses are when we feel threatened and do one of two behaviors. We either freeze and cannot act against the threat, or we fawn and try to please to avoid conflict. Today, I just want to chat a little bit about the freeze fawn response and how it's related to rejection trauma. Rejection trauma and complex post-traumatic disorder, or otherwise CPTSD, is long-term rejection by family or peers in childhood. Now, let me just say this. You can get CPTSD as an adult, certainly if you're in an abusive situation, a war, what have you. The reason why it's more common that it's the cause is from childhood is because as adults, hopefully we make better decisions and we have more resources than child. Like for instance, if we're around two people that are constantly arguing as adults, we could leave. If we're around two people that are arguing as children, such as our parents, it's not so easy to leave. So when I talk about child, it's primarily because, again, CPTSD has more roots in children, but certainly it could apply, and most definitely rejection trauma will apply if you've been betrayed. And you're watching this, so I'm guessing you have been betrayed. The child may decide that they must be worthless or worse. Children need acceptance to mature correctly. So without their parents and peers showing them that they're wanted and valuable, they shrivel and later grow to be traumatized adults. So what happens is a lot of times if we do have rejection trauma as a child, or we do have CPTSD, it's like this. Well, I mean, this is one of the many additional challenges and difficulties of healing from trauma is, let's just say you had a traumatic past or traumatic background. If you have a wound in your arm, let's just say you have a 3rd-degree burn. Okay, that's going to heal, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take some energy. It's going to take some, professionalism, yada, yada. Same thing with betrayal or trauma. It's going to take all what I just said. But if you take a knife and you stab the inside of that 3rd-degree burn, the healing is going to take a little longer, actually a lot longer, and it's going to need more intensive to address it more intensely. Now, if you take a knife and stab it again, now it's like almost impossible to heal. It's not going to say that it won't heal, but with a lot of time and effort and work and energy, it will. It's just going to be more difficult. That's with trauma. So I never want to reduce anyone's trauma at all. But people that have multiple complex trauma, it's very difficult, borderline impossible, unless they get some serious professional mental health by a trauma-informed professional. It's very difficult because you've really punctured a deep, deep wound already. Anyways, one of the consequences of rejection trauma is the formation, like I just said, of CPTSD. That can form in response to chronic traumatization, such as constant rejection over months or years. Other causes can occur because of emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, domestic violence, living in a war zone, human trafficking, etc. It's unusual for an adult to form CPTSD, but it's not impossible, as an adult is in a position where they are either captive, like kidnapped, a prisoner of war, or like I said before, in a domestic violence situation. Certainly that can form. If anybody, actually males or female, if they're in a relationship where there's abuse over time, absolutely CPTSD can form. Rejection trauma is often found with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Both conditions are highly damaging to the social lives of those who experience them. So the freeze response, like I said, evolution is has given us methods to escape or hide from predators. Freeze is one of the 4 recognized responses that you have when you are faced with physical or a psychological threat. Included with the freeze is the fight, flee, and fawn responses. When we freeze, we cannot flee, but we are actually frozen in place. This leaves us vulnerable to a human predator as we became incapable of fighting off or escaping. Now, let me just say, this is not a sign of weakness. You know, for some of you people that are maybe watching this saying, well, I don't know why I didn't do anything. I don't know why I didn't stand up for myself. I don't know why I didn't say anything. I just froze. I couldn't say anything. That was your body's natural reaction to a threat. So, you know, it had nothing to do with you being weak in any capacity. The fawn response. The other evolutionary gift humanity has given us is the fawn response, which is when people act to please their assailant to avoid any conflict. One might use the fawn response after unsuccessfully attempting to fight or flight or freeze. It's typical among those who grew up in homes with rejection trauma. So if you grew up in homes where you've had some rejection trauma, the fawn response may be your actually first line of defense. For instance, if you grew up in a home with a narcissistic parent, or you were neglected or rejected, your only hope for survival was to be agreeable and helpful. The problem with fawning is that children grow up to become doormats or codependent adults and lose their own sense of identity in caring for another. And this is what's difficult, because I'll never say that somebody's action caused somebody to betray them. But when you lose your own identity, you're out of touch with yourself. Studies show that when you're out of touch with yourself, there's more of a chance of a betrayal to happen, because you're not in tune. You're not in tune with yourself. You're not in tune with others. You're not listening to your instincts, your gut, yada, yada. Not to blame you at all. It's just, that's you're a product of your upbringing. These adults never allow themselves to think of themselves, or for themselves, as for that matter, pursuing activities that please their partner for fear they will be rejected by them. Fawning has warning signs you can watch out for, identifying whether you are exhibiting this evolutionary behavior, such as, you find it difficult to say no, your values are fluid in intimate interactions, you have guilt and anger together, you blank out emotionally, your emotions erupt unexpectedly and in unusual ways, you feel responsible for the reactions of others, you feel like no one knows or cares to know you. Fawning combined with CPTSD can leave an adult in an unenviable position of losing themselves in the response of their partners and their friends. So this just doesn't occur with intimate relationships. It really occurs with, friends, neighbors, associates, coworkers, so-and-so. No one can know you because you're too busy people pleasing to allow anybody to get to know you. And as a matter of fact, you're often so out of touch with yourself, even if people do get to know you, they're not really getting to know the true you. You may believe you're unlovable, and for this reason, you fear rejection more than anything in the world. All right, so how do we overcome these natural biological responses? Fawn types seek safety by emerging with the wishes, needs, and demands of others. They act as if unconsciously they believe the price of admission to any relationship is forfeiture of their needs, rights, preferences, and boundaries. It isn't difficult to see how these caught up in the fawn response become codependent, how those caught up with this become codependent with others and are open to victimization from abuse and narcissistic partners. Many freeze types unconsciously believe that people and danger are synonymous and that safety lies in solitude. Outside of fantasy, many give up entirely on the possibility of love. The freeze response, also known as the camouflage response, but we don't use that term, we use freeze. But just in case you hear the camouflage response, they're talking about freeze. That often triggers the individual into hiding, isolating, and avoiding human contact as much as possible. This type can also be frozen in retreat mode, and it seems as if their starter button is on the stuck off position. Out of the 4 types of trauma responses, the freeze type is the most difficult to treat. And here are some reasons why the freeze response is the most difficult to treat. Number 1, they're extremely reluctant to form a therapeutic relationship with their mental health professional because they relate positive relational experiences with rejection. And it makes so much sense. It's like, if you can't trust yourself and you've been raised in an area of no matter who you trust or who you tried to trust, there's going to come with some rejection. It's hard to talk to a mental health professional because you don't trust them either. Also, the people who, quote, overcome their reluctance to trust their mental health professional easily spook, and they wind up oftentimes ending coaching or therapy or what have you. 2, they are harder to educate about the causes of trauma because they're unconscious of their own fear and their inner critic. They project the perfectionism of their own critic onto others rather than themselves, then use it for justification of isolation. Freeze types they experience denial about the consequences of seeing their life through a narrow lens. The freeze response ends in the collapse response, believed to be unconscious, as though they are about to die and self-medicate by releasing internal opioids. Freeze types are more likely to become addicted to substances to self-medicate. So anyways, while both freeze and fawn types appear tightly wound in their problems and buried under their rejection trauma, they can and are treated successfully by mental health professionals. If you recognize yourself from anything that I've been talking about during this class, it's critical that you continue to seek help, whether here, with me, with some type of mental health professional. Hopefully they're trauma informed. If you're in an unsafe relationship currently, here is the sign that you've been waiting for. Exit as quickly as possible. Your life is worth far more than allowing somebody else to continuously hurt you. You are very valuable to this world and to all inhabit it because you are you. There will never be another you, and that makes you invaluable. Please try to remember this as you fight to gain peace in your fight against your trauma, both from childhood possibly and certainly adulthood. Regardless of why you're watching this class. I've heard before, if the price of peace, if the price of something is your peace, the price is too high. If it costs you your peace, the price is too high. Because really, stress is like the #1 killer. So have patience with all things, but first have patience with yourself. Never confuse your mistakes with your value as a human being. You are perfectly valuable. You are creative. You are a worthwhile person simply because you exist. That's it. Simply because you exist and nobody else is like you. Everybody else is taken. So just be you. And no amount of triumphs or tribulations can ever change that. Life isn't as magical here, and you're not the only one who feels like you don't belong, or that maybe you're better somewhere else. You do belong here. Life is worth living. You're needed here. You're needed in this world. All of your strengths and your weaknesses are needed for a reason. You were born for a reason. And that's the best part is you oftentimes don't know that reason until you live a little bit more and that reason comes to you. So stick with it. Stick with these classes. Stick with your life. Stick with your healing. So I'm Coach Jay, and I hope you got something out of this class. And until next week, take care of yourself and others. God bless.